So we have yet another member from the Discord.
Yes.
We have Joe today, which I feel like we've been enjoying these so much that we're at some points talking more like before, and then we do the interview, and then after. There's just so much, and we've really been enjoying to get to know more people in our field. It's going to be a little bit of a long one. We're going to touch on quite a few things. So
it's all great experience too.
You'll see.
It's so good,
it's
guys.
A lot.
It's so good.
But it's really good.
Well, all these are really, really good. That's the hard part too. They're all been so good, and I hope you guys
Laura's
are enjoying
getting flustered.
I'm excited. All right,
let's just dive in. We have Joe today talking about a variety of settings and kind of the bachelor's PTA program.
Let's go.
Let's do it. The PTA podcast with your hosts Ken
and Laura. Thanks again for joining for another exciting episode. So we have Joe here today. We're so excited for you guys to meet him. Me and Ken have been looking forward to this too. We've got a ton of questions, I feel like, for you. So I hope you're ready.
Yeah.
But let's go ahead and start with just like you introducing yourself. Tell us kind of like, a little bit about hobbies, what you like to do in your spare time, kind of where you're based out of, and then also just like what you're currently doing in the PTA field and how you got into it. All the good stuff.
Yeah, so a lot of questions I hit on there. So my name's Joe. I'm a physical therapist assistant. I've been physical therapist assistant for almost going on 10 years now.
Nice.
Right now.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That beats both me and Ken put together.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, it's a long time, and it goes by really quick, surprisingly. And then at times it seems like it goes by slow.
Okay.
But I went to Pima Medical Institute for the accelerated PTA program in 2012 and graduated 2011, graduated 2012, got licensed in beginning of 2013 January, and from there, I worked in several PRN positions based out of Denver, Colorado. The market at the time is very saturated with physical therapists and physical therapist assistants.
Really?
Kind of, yes, a desirable place everybody supposedly wants to be.
That surprises me because I feel like our field there do such a good job of like not oversaturating the market.
Yeah.
So did you find like a lot of people were flying in and moving there after they got licensed?
Yeah, so I moved out to Denver in beginning of 2011. I basically moved out here for the program, but I always wanted to be out here. Yeah, for school. At the time, Denver was growing exponentially. I don't even know the figures, but it was something like 1,000 people.
It was popping at that time. Yeah.
Yeah. And so most of my classmates at the time, I think 90% of them were from out of state, and it was hard to find a native Coloradan. It was a joke that nobody's from Colorado, basically.
In all fairness, I feel like Vegas is kind of the same way.
Maybe a little melting pot.
Yeah. I'm originally from Southern California, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, I was born here, so I guess I'm the exception.
You are the exception. But so you kind of were, it was oversaturated and you were kind of like, what next? Or
it was what next. And actually, when we began our PTA program, our instructors straight up told us that none of us might find jobs in Colorado and that we might have to move out of state because that's how bad it was. And we kind of all brushed it off because it's like our first week and we're here to learn. We're not here to like already be thinking about the job, right? But she hit the nail on the head and she was correct. So I was working mainly SNFs and subacute care, just kind of bouncing around whoever would give me hours. And in 2014, I went back for my bachelor's in science and physical therapist assistant. It was actually the first program that they had. So I was with the first cohort that went through. And I did that because I was like, how do I make myself more marketable? I was also thinking, with the physical therapist being a master's and then their vision 2020 was to be a doctorate. Now everybody has their doctor. Are they going to do the same thing eventually with the physical therapist assistant? I was like, I'm working PRN jobs. I may as well just get this out of the way, get ahead of the curve, and just have it done with.
Kind of hitting on that a little bit.
Yeah.
So you were the first cohort, so you did another 2 years to get the bachelor's?
So it was another 16 months.
Okay.
Oh, that's not terrible.
Did you do it at Pima or?
Yes, I did it at Pima, and it was 100% online because
Okay.
you already have your PTA degree. That associate's level is all we need, right, to sit for our exam and everything. You have to be licensed. You have to have gone through a CAPTE accredited program to even attend this bachelor program. Since then, I know there's several others that have popped up, and they're kind of, it's like they call it like a 1+1 program. So if you don't have your bachelor's, you take your associates, you apply it towards your bachelor's, and then they just kind of pick a bunch of classes that they want to throw in there for the bachelor's.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've heard that too, where it's kind of just like they take some of more of the kinesiology courses and they're like, this looks good with it, and or athletic
Yeah.
training courses, and they throw it in. Because both me and Ken did kind of reverse of what you did. We
Yeah.
went and got our bachelor's in kinesiology and then decided, well, for me at least, I can say I was like, yeah, I don't want to go back to school for my DPT. That
Yeah.
looks like a lot of work, a lot of money. And I was
Yep.
also had just gotten married, moved to a new state, and I was like, forget this. I'm going to be a PTA.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, most of my associates program, they were the same way. I would say 75% already had exercise science degrees or kinesiology degrees, and they just looked at the price tag on the DPT degree. And I don't know about your guys' program, but you have to shadow to get into these programs, right?
Yeah.
So you get to
Mhm.
see who's
Kind of, yeah.
doing the hands-on stuff, and a lot of them were like, well, the DPTs aren't doing as much. They're kind of a eval, progress note, discharge machine, and the PTA is doing the treatments.
Yeah, we're
Yeah, and I
really
So
feel
in
like
yeah,
contact.
yeah,
that's a good point because like when I was working with some patients, like we still have that so many people keep trying to push us to like, oh, like when are you gonna go back to school, get your DPT and all this? And I'm like, honestly, I like working with patients. I like having the conversations with patients,
yeah,
and for me to keep doing that and not be stuck behind a desk and the computer all day,
yeah,
I gotta be a PTA. So I'm like, honestly, I love being a PTA. It's why I went into the field, not
yeah.
just for being behind that desk.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, and it depends on where you are. I mean, the PTI I work with right now, we're the only two in our department, so he actually gets to do, the evals, and he gets to treat and everything patient care, which is awesome. But, he lives in Denver too, and you got to think, why is he coming out here as opposed to being like in a PT mill where that's exactly what he was doing. He would do, dry needling, he'd do the eval discharge, but a
Hmm.
lot of it is not as hands-on with the patients
Yeah.
as the PTA gets.
I
So
totally agree on that. My mom, it's funny because my mom's also a PTA, and so my whole entire life, she's like, "You should just be a PTA. Don't be a
yeah,
PT. Don't be a PT. You should be a
yeah,
PTA. We do less paperwork." And I'm like, "No, I'm gonna go get my, doctorate and da da da. I want to be Dr. Laura." We always joked I'd be Dr.
yeah,
Laura.
yeah,
Yeah, no, the title was
Didn't
not
do it.
worth it to me.
yeah.
By all means.
Well, I mean,
But did you find Oh, sorry,
I was,
Ken.
well, I was just like going through that program to get the BS and PTA. Like, do you feel like it's worth it? Do you feel like they should change the requirement down the road? Because there's always talks about changing the requirements. It just hasn't happened. But do you feel
Yeah.
like we should?
So yeah, I think it should be.
You're on the same boat
I'm a
as
little
us.
biased. I'm on the other side of it, and I've even had classmates that I graduated with ask me about it because they're like, "Well, maybe I should go back." And I was like, "Honestly, if you want to go back, go back, but it's not needed." Do I think it should eventually be a requirement? Honestly, I do feel like it should. We need to close the gap between the education between the DPT and us. Honestly, um, the way they're doing it right now, I think we're still kind of in the guinea pig phase of setting it up to make more sense, because the program that I went through from a bachelor's is definitely different than how they have it set up now. Like they added chemistry to it, they added pharmacology to it before those weren't
Ooh.
Oh
in the
wow.
bachelor's program. They should set it up in a way that, and I think this should be the overall PT field, almost like nursing. You can go RN, BSN, you can go be, MSN, DNP is what they're, so like you can go through these different scopes of practice by going and getting more education. And I feel like maybe that's how PT should be, because PTAs, we're drawn to it because we like the clinical hands-on. We're
Mm-hmm.
all learning the same thing. It's just as hard as I don't want to say I haven't gone and got my doctorate in PT, so I can't say it's just as hard, but from what I've heard over the years, it's just as fast paced. We learn all the same things. We don't get some of the more microscopic context of why, but eventually we learn it out in the field of why
Yeah.
we're doing what we're doing. And I think it
Yeah.
needs to go like PTA associates, PTA, bachelor's, and then you can go directly into like your DPT if you want to, or you can
Yeah.
stop anywhere you want. But the way
Mm-hmm.
that it's so divided between like you're either a PTA or you're a DPT, and there's no easy to like transition from the PTA to the DPT, you know?
Yeah.
They make it really difficult because right now there's only two schools. Because I've considered
Yep.
it for the longest time, and
Yep.
it's just the amount of money, either moving or traveling every weekend. Like it wasn't practical. So I'm like, you know what? I'm not gonna do it. Like I enjoy being a PTA,
Yeah.
but you're right. They don't make it very easy for us to transition to a DPT.
Well,
Yeah.
and I think
And
too, our field in general is starting to change with our role. Like you said, like it kind of, we were a little bit of guinea pigs for certain things, but they got so focused on, kind of bringing PTs up. Now they're realizing, okay, now we need to bring almost in a way, I feel like the PTAs start
yeah.
including them more. And I've seen that even with, they wanted to change our name in our bylaws from
Okay.
physical therapist assistant to physical therapy assistant. So we weren't actually a therapist assistant anymore. We were a therapy
Interesting.
assistant. Yeah, and like it was like at first I was like, this is the dumbest thing. Who really cares? But then I was like, oh well, it does kind of change the mindset of
It
we're not
does.
your assistant. We are here to treat the patients, and we are treating the patients, and we're assisting the patients, not the actual physical therapist. Which I was like, interesting concept. Um, but I think the same thing, like bringing in a BS situation, I think would be beneficial because I would love to see like an exercise, a straight up just exercise class where you're learning. That's the hardest thing I think when you come out of school is putting what you've learned, muscles and everything together with how to actually put that together with some of the exercises. Because if you don't really do exercises too much, or you're just used to the same ones, it's
Hmm.
hard to figure out like the concepts in a way. You're like, I kind of get it, but like I feel like going more in depth would be nice in a class like that. Definitely for coming right out of school. Um,
Yeah.
so I'm
And
with you on that.
you guys both come from a kines background for your
Hmm.
bachelor's, correct? So I'm
Yeah,
Mhm.
assuming that you've had exercise physiology,
I
right,
love
for
that
that?
class.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
I mean, it was a pain in the butt.
the one thing that
It
they
was great.
did do right for the BS portion of the PTA degree, and I'm not like, I wish I was being sponsored by Pima, but I'm not. I can only talk of the journey that I went through, but
Hmm.
they actually did a good job because they added a legit kines class. They added an exercise physiology class, and they were tough, but they taught you like more of why you're doing the things you're doing. It's not just like, hey, here's some exercises that you learned by like a video or your PT showed you, or
Hmm.
somehow you just came up with this idea, but you're like, now you're able to kind of think about like the movements and the
Hmm.
why, and then put it all together, which I think I think we could benefit from,
Yeah, I think it could just be more in depth a little bit. Like we
Yeah.
kind of cover it, but I feel like we have so much we're covering in these associate programs
Yep.
that it's kind of like a here it is, and then we're on to the next thing versus where if
It's
we had more time
it's
in a
like
BS program.
drinking from a fire hose a little bit,
Yep.
when I think back about it, because gosh, that was is quite some time ago. I'm like, man, I learned all that stuff, and it was usually like you learned something one week, and it was either the end of the week you're tested on it, or the beginning of the next week we were tested on
Hmm.
it. And I'm like, I think that's we we shine from being able to take information that we learned from our PTs or a different clinician, and we're able to like memorize it
like
or
implement it and
yeah, and
mhm.
just like drop of a pen, like we know how to do this stuff because that's how we learned in school. We had to learn that fast. um but yeah, I agree. I think we could know the why a little bit better, and I think that's probably where a bachelor's degree would
Would be
help. And
handy.
then maybe put some of those general education classes or the prereqs that are required for the DPT, you know?
In them. Yeah,
True.
Yeah,
I think that would be a smart idea. Because kinesiology covers pretty much majority of them anyways too.
yeah,
And I look back and I was like, my physics class are very helpful in a way. A
yeah,
lot of the times when I'm thinking about things or working through things. Um, so like, physics is a requirement, which you do take in our at least our associate program. And like you took physics, but in college for the program, the DPT program, you have to take one and two. And
yep.
so it kind of went a little bit more in depth. But now that you went got your BS because you're like, okay, I'll be a little bit more marketable. They have this program. Did
Yeah.
you really find that it was in a way beneficial to any of your pay or finding a job? Like that became worth going back to school in a way?
So I
I know
think
the hard
that
question.
no, I think yes, it did. So I don't know if it's coincidence because my wife at the time, she has business degree, so she knows her way around having to advocate for my needs and like the pay raise and stuff like that. But
Nice.
I
I
had
need that.
also finished my bachelor's, and she's like, she was helping me and coaching me through it. She's like, you got higher education, you should be more marketable. I can technically take on leadership roles with it. That's also what they teach you in the program, to be more of a
Hmm.
like
Oh, that's
leadership
awesome.
role. Um, so yeah, it did give me a significant pay raise, but that kind of coincides with where I'm working, what I'm doing, and then having kind of that mentorship from my wife to be able to advocate for my, what my worth is.
Yeah. Oh,
No,
I
those are
agree with that.
uh, well, I'm sure we can talk about this BS, like bachelor's and everything. Not BS, like
I
the
know we had a
bachelor's, like
whole in all
the
honest, we have a whole,
stuff.
like, episode on that too, like, we have
Because
Yeah.
already discussed
yeah,
it. I don't
because
know if you
you are the first PTA that we've met at least that has a BS, so we have already have so many questions there. But you did
Yeah.
mention work, so let's kind of go into where you work, what kind of patients you work with, because I know we talked a little bit before working like in the rural area, like you see a little bit of everything. So how's that?
Yeah, so it can be hard and rewarding, and it can be very dull and boring, to be honest. So I feel like because I work out of a hospital in a rural area, I do see literally everything. It goes through waves of being, I'll see a lot more outpatient patients, from anything from just total hip to knees. I'll get a ton of them, and then I won't see that for 9 months, and I'll get COVID patients. I'll get just general weakness, influenza, people falling, breaking stuff, inpatient. It keeps me on my toes. I'm never not learning something or relearning something that I forgot. Um, I guess if you're that type of person that likes to not be a master of anything and just kind of be a jack of all trades, I would say go for it. But if you really want to specialize in one single area, it's probably not the place to be honest.
So, like, if you like consistency, it's probably not your spot, but if you like to mix it up or you get bored with treating the same thing over and over again, like out here in the city,
Absolutely.
you're getting a lot of knees, shoulders, and, you know, honestly, in our area, we get a lot of car accidents because no one apparently knows how to drive in Vegas.
Yeah.
So you get a lot of lower back and cervical MVAs. And
Yeah.
so if you're looking for something, you know, possibility of that rural atmosphere sounds like it might be a good opportunity to look
Yeah,
into.
because it is something they mentioned at my school, because we talked about Pahrump earlier. So some of us have to drive out to Pahrump for our clinical rotations, and almost nobody wants to do it because it's about a 2-hour drive from where our school is located. But one thing they kind of advocate for the students that do want to go is the potential to learn, because of the fact that you'll see so many different kinds of patients, from neurological to peds to geriatric. It's just a great opportunity to learn.
Yeah.
And kind of like you were mentioning, like you see a little bit of everything. So like, what's kind of your thoughts on working with, like, do you feel like you have to switch your brain so many times, or because you get a consistent patients for a couple months and then you switch? Like, I guess I don't know, I'm not sure what I'm really trying to ask, but
I think I
like,
get what you're asking here.
What he's
So
putting
like
down.
right.
I think my mind, for my mind, it's just constantly going all the time. So it works out for me. I'm probably a little bit on, you know, the spectrum of ADHD or something like that, neurodivergent, whatever you want to call it.
They keep changing names.
Yeah, it keeps, yeah. A, you know, I think it's easy for me to do that, but it can sometimes be hard. Like when I go through a lot of outpatient, I start to get consistently like in a groove, and I'm feeling like the rhythm and got like a way I'm just doing stuff, getting really good at working with them. And then all of a sudden we'll get like a bunch
Here's a
of
stroke patient.
inpatients. Yeah, we usually don't see stroke. We fly them out, but
Oh,
like
interesting.
they'll get flown out and they'll get flown back to us maybe, or shipped back to us, and I'll deal with the aftermath of it. But yeah, it can keep you on your toes, I guess. You're constantly having to switch your brain from like orthopedics, musculoskeletal, pretty much straightforward bread and butter of what we do. And then you'll be like, oh, I got a neuro patient that has a brain tumor and just like all over the place. And you're just like, okay, now I got to go maybe review my neuro stuff and how to do all this stuff. I've seen some really bizarre things like I've seen patients with mad cow disease. I've seen things that
Oh,
are just
what?
like, we had
You're
the
like the
former,
odds of seeing it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like yeah, it keeps you on your toes. There's just weird stuff like that. I'm like, yeah, you only see this in a big city, right? I was like, no, these people got to live somewhere, you know, and
I
have
feel
to
like you
live.
probably see more than a big city because of the fact that, you know, when you're in a big city, you have the specialty clinics in a way. Like you have
Yeah,
a
yeah,
neuro clinic, and so they're all
yeah,
seeing the neuro. So like in my outpatient setting, like honestly, if I got a fresh neuro, I'd be hitting the books because it's not on my brain. Like I'd be
yeah,
like, hold up, what are we doing here? What are the
yeah,
signs that I need to look out for again? Because they're
yeah,
not fresh in my brain.
yeah.
But you technically work in a hospital, correct? Like it's a hospital setting
Correct. Yes.
and you get a mix of everything. Now,
Correct.
how does that work since it's such a rural area and I'm assuming it's tiny. It's a tiny hospital.
608 people live in the town, and then
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
we draw in people from like the outer towns
even
that
the
are
Outer
even
Banks in a
smaller.
way.
Yeah, yeah, yep.
So, how does it work with kind of working all together with like the nurses, because I'm sure you're in contact with the nurses, the doctors more.
Mhm.
Like how does that co-treatment work? Do you find that's actually kind of better in a way because everybody's right there, it's tiny, or do you feel like sometimes it's almost harder because everybody's stepping on each other's toes?
So I don't feel like anybody steps on each other's toes out here. I feel like it's
That's awesome.
almost so tiny that that's so you don't step. It's pretty good interdisciplinary team.
Mhm.
You know, I talk to nurses all the time. They talk to me. Same with the physicians that rotate through. You know, we'll bounce things off of each other. I've never had a problem with it. I actually I kind of prefer that setting, even when I was working in subacute or even like SNFs, like being able to have the nurse there, or even the physician, or the, you know, the, I don't want to call them mid levels because they hate it, but like a NP or PA. It's great to be able to like pick their brains, and then they also pick your brains quite a bit more than I thought I would. Like when I went to PTA school, I'm like, I'm kind of a little bit low on the totem pole, and then you
Right?
find
No
out
one wants to talk to me.
yeah, you find out real quick if you're that provider for PT, like they want your information, and they want to know what you know, and they want recommendations. Just last week, I actually had a PA bring me in on a treatment. She wanted like a consult about like where to stick lidocaine needles in muscles, because she wasn't sure if she was on the right muscles and all that stuff. And
Wow.
it's just
Oh, that's interesting.
very interesting stuff. You know, the physicians will come in and be like, hey, what's this person's fall risk? I was thinking about putting them on a blood thinner. Do you think that's appropriate or not? So you get a lot of consulting back and forth. And when I don't know stuff, like I definitely bring them in. I was like, oh, I think this person's having a heart attack. Like, you know, I like
Please
having
check
that
them out.
there as opposed to, yeah, as
Go
opposed
to
to,
the ER, or should I call an ambulance for you?
exactly. When do I start, you know, when you start coding on me, when I'm going to start doing CPR, like I like having the nurses and the physicians around for that.
Right? You're like, you guys take over now.
Yeah.
Clearly out of my scope. Bye.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome, because like even when I worked in a SNF for a little bit, but like I didn't know any of the doctors who round. I didn't know them. They didn't care about talking to us.
Yeah.
You know, all they cared about was getting the report from the PTs, even like they didn't really come in and talk to them. So
Yeah.
I think that's such a cool aspect of something that, at least in our setting and out here in Vegas, we don't get to do. We don't get to have those conversations with doctors or NPs. And I'm sure you've learned so much from it too, which is such an awesome experience.
Yeah, I think I tend to think that it's normal what I'm doing, but then I'm starkly reminded by my other friends in the field that it's not really as normal as you think it is. You know, I like it. It does set me up in a position where like it teaches me how to be more of a leader and more advocate for my patients and also myself. So
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. Is there other therapy stuff like occupational speech therapy where you're at?
nope, we are it.
Oh
We
wow.
have to either send them out, or at one point when I first started working out here, they did have a on-call SLP.
Yeah.
But we no longer have access to that. So that stuff usually goes over to a different hospital town over, and some people don't want to drive an hour there. So they either don't receive the services, unfortunately, or
They get them
occupational
modified.
therapy. Yeah, they get the PT version of
Mm-hmm.
occupational therapy, to be honest. You know, it's like
Yeah.
we're doing therapeutic activities today, you know, try to make it engaging, you know,
Mm-hmm.
how are we going to make this work, you know, make it more functional for them, as opposed to like I don't know, you know, here's our exercises type deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
How many
I
people
can see.
are so if it's just physical therapy, how many people are on your team?
Two.
Like
I'm
is it
one of
just
two.
you and your PT?
Yep,
Just
that is it.
two.
Just two.
Caseload wise, like what do you look at? Like how many patients a day?
So we can see anything up to 12. We usually don't see that just because it's a small town. The most I've seen was 12, but the least I've seen, honestly, when I first started working out here, I'd be lucky if I had one or two. Like you
Oh
kind
wow.
of had to build up our clientele, build up our name in the community. You have to kind of earn
Gain
your,
trust.
yeah, gain trust, and
Get your
it's
stripes.
it's hard. Yep. Yeah, yeah.
So
It's brutal. It was
small
brutal the
towns
first few years.
are close knit. They don't trust
Yeah.
outsiders usually.
Yeah.
Um, so with that being said, like since you only had like one or two, were you guaranteed pay at all? Like, because I know
Yep.
usually rural settings will pay a bonus for signing on. They'll usually also pay higher just because it's hard to get people to go out there, of course.
Yep.
Um, but was it guaranteed? Like, oh, you're coming out here for a day, but you only have one scheduled. It's not like it's anything your fault. are you still guaranteed a full day pay? Is it varied place to place?
So when I first started coming out here, I was working for a contract company. That's how I ended up out here. I was doing
Okay.
travel. I was doing travel PT within the state of Colorado. So I was going to a lot of these like rural towns in the middle of nowhere. Some of them really great, some of them not so great.
You're like, please don't send me back there.
Yeah, it's like, man, I don't really want a gun, but I wish I had one right now.
Oh God!
It's like I don't, like my whole body is like giving me like the tinglies. Something's off.
Like,
yeah,
I don't. Get to my car. Get to my car. Get to my car.
Yeah,
but only unlock the one side.
Exactly, and a lot of places that you're sleeping, you're like, am I safe here? No. So when I came out here with a contract company, and so when I was doing that with them, I was guaranteed the hours. They would say, you have X, Y, and Z patients. If you only have 3 or 4, you're getting paid whether they showed up, whether they didn't show up. You're guaranteed that pay, and then they would pay you for the time driving out to the location. I actually made my own contract because I found out the company I was working for was making a lot more money off me, and I was getting the not what I was worth, right? Sorry, I got flies flying around here.
Oh no, you're good.
Need the electric fly swatter. But so I made my own contract with the help of coaching, from my wife. She's like, business background, that's where that comes in handy. She's like, you can make a lot more money and you can still save your hospital, a bunch of money. And so now, to answer the question, when I'm out here, whether I have patients or I don't have patients, I'm still getting paid. It's shift work. I clock in, people show up, don't show up. That's on them.
It's almost like a salary in a way.
Yes,
you're more on a salary base.
Yes, I will try to headhunt them and call them and make sure everything's okay. Some people they just forget sometimes, and sometimes they don't want to be here. And then you got to kind of sell them on it, right? Be like, okay, well, come in next time. These are the benefits of physical therapy, right?
That sounds like all physical therapy places.
Very familiar with that process.
Yeah, I think we need like more psychology in our programs as well. Motivational interviewing is huge.
Right.
That would really help.
Yeah.
Well, it's you definitely have to have the right tone, and that's the thing too, is like coming at them a lot. I've heard people come at them hard, and it's like you're not gonna get anywhere with that person. Like I could tell you, some people that work on some people, you are now just completely scaring them off, and so I agree with that.
Yeah, I think my first few years in the field actually taught me that. Definitely sniff work taught me that. It's like, hey, let's get you up today, and they're like, no, I want to sleep. You're like, well, if you sleep for too long, these are the detriments, but how about we just try to get you edge of bed? So you kind of learn it as you go along, but it's probably the biggest thing I don't like about our field is like, I don't really want to be your coach today. I just want to
I just want to do my job.
Yeah, I want to do my job. I'm really good at it. Come on, will you please just get educated?
I literally left the sniff because of that reason.
Yeah.
So actually how I tore my Achilles is because I did a deep squat down to a patient who's in a wheelchair refusing for the 3rd time. And it's the 3rd time rule. If they refuse 3 times, you can't do it. So literally I had to get down. And the place I was at, and you had to tell them this too, is like, if you're not doing physical therapy today, you're here because you're in this facility because you require physical therapy. If you refuse physical therapy, your insurance can come back and deny your whole entire stay. And you had to tell them that, because you're like, there's a reason. I don't want you to get stuck with the bill. And I told her pretty much the exact wording of like, you're here because your insurance requires you to do physical therapy. If you deny the physical therapy, there is a chance that you will not be covered.
Lose your spot.
Well, no, she could stay there, but she just won't. They won't cover any of the pay.
Yeah.
And she'll get stuck with the bill. And she's like, "Are you threatening me?" I'm like, "Nope. I'm just telling you what can happen.
Yeah.
It's all up to you on what you do. This is your 3rd time. If I walk out that door, I have to write it down."
Yeah.
I was like, I'm liable to write it down.
Yeah, time to bring in social work or the director of rehab to do the sales pitch type
Yeah,
thing.
she got up, we did it, but
yeah,
I tore my
that's
Achilles giving that speech.
that's a brutal way to have that injury. Like on the third time too, I'm like,
Yeah,
something's
I
off.
like
Something's off. I'm not going into that room.
oh, I was so annoyed with her too because she was a repeat offender too because she's been in that facility before too, and they're always like, "Oh, she's gonna die." And I'm like, "Dude, you know what you're here for? Like, why are we doing this? Come on, like." It's the end of the day. You're literally my last patient. Like, I'd like to go home. Kind of want you to refuse. Like, then I get to go home 15 minutes early. But then
That's
I
where
felt
you
the pop and I was like, I'm so over this.
yeah, that's where you pull out like research says bed rest, blah blah blah, contributes to pneumonia, blood clots, all this crap, and
Yep.
then they're like,
I'm
"What's
pretty
that?"
sure she's the type who would have been like, that's fine. And I'm like, oh my gosh. She's the
Yeah.
one that you got to hit her pocket. That's what I learned. And that's the thing too, is
Mm-hmm.
like you have to learn which one, how they're going to respond. She
Mm-hmm.
responds to financial,
Yeah.
where, other patients, they respond to, possible detriments to their health. Like
Yeah.
it's definitely something that could be learned. But so with you being in a rural setting, how far is the actual drive from where you live? Out of curiosity.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I think my
Oh,
internet was like lagging.
no, you're good. So how far is the actual drive from where you actually live?
It's about 175 miles, give or take maybe 1 or 2 miles. So
Oh,
it's
so
about
that's like
2.5 hour drive.
yeah, I was about to say. So that's a drive. So how
Yeah.
does that work? Like you have a family. How does that work with your family and everything? Do you find that it
So
puts a strain or any recommendations on people who are looking at that do have a family?
So when I met my wife, when I started dating her, I was already doing this. So this is we're
She
kind
was
of
used
just
to it?
used to it, yeah, to begin
Mhm.
with. I would say it's probably not for everybody. And I'm only speaking from my point of view.
Mhm.
But at the same time, we don't have kids. We have a dog, and it's just me and my wife. And someday we'll probably have kids, right? And then we'll adapt to that. But I also get 4 days off a week where if I need to take care of the kids 4 days a week, I get to be home and I get to be with them. And I've talked to other people that work out here as well. The physicians that are on 7 days for a week, and I say like, how do you do it? And they say, honestly, when I'm here, I get to focus on work and whatnot, and when I get to go home, most of them have like a couple weeks off. They're like, I get to be present for the whole time. It's not like I go my 9 to 5 or my 8 to 4, and
Mhm.
I see my kids when I wake up, or my wife or my husband, and I see them in the morning, and I get to come home and have dinner, and maybe like everybody's in bed. Like you actually
Yeah.
get the
Yeah.
full amount of time with them. But
Well,
the cons are like I don't get to go home if something happens. Like I have emergency come up. Like I'm not a trauma surgeon, so of course if something really bad came up, I'd be able to leave. But it's like when the
it's
little
still a two
things
and a
in
half hour
life,
drive,
yeah, like I
Yeah.
can't be there within a second. And sometimes I can't go. Like there's just things in life that you have to just deal with, and I have to sit here and, let it sit with me and process it, and I don't get to go home and deal with that situation. So it can be hard. It's I consider
There's good and
it's a little bit
bads.
of travel therapy.
Yeah. I could see that. I
Yeah.
could definitely see how that counts. And like if you have this might be a great type of setting for you too if you have a hard time almost turning off your work too
Yeah.
because of the
Yeah.
fact that you're so secluded from it like when you do go home
Yeah.
that you have no choice but to turn it off. You're not gonna drive another like 2.5 hours back out there just to go check something like that's
No.
not gonna happen. So it might be a great opportunity if you have because I know some people who have a hard time separating work and home.
Oh,
Like
for
I
sure.
learned myself that working from inside my house when I did remote work was not the thing for me because I would work overtime for free because I couldn't separate it. And so that this is a great opportunity maybe that people can see if they have the same issue.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, you can travel therapy is usually where it starts with these little rural towns. They're always looking for people. They are hurting for people that will provide any type of service. It's not even just physical therapy, but it's definitely a way where, PTAs can step up and be like, I got the skill set, I want to go market myself and possibly, help out people that actually find it rewarding. Everybody that I work with out here, they find it so valuable. They all so genuine and thankful for, the services that we're providing them. And I feel like when I was working in the inner city, the bigger facilities, sometimes you don't get that. Like you said, you get people that just don't want to work, or they're very disgruntled and they just, I don't know. I feel like it can be very rewarding out here. At the same time, it can be very awful. Like I worked out in a rural town during COVID, and you guys can kind of extrapolate what that was like. It was bad. It was awful. It was probably one of the worst times of my career that I've had. I thought about leaving physical therapy because of it, being inpatient, COVID, and just it was crazy. It was super crazy, but we're on the other side of it, thank God. And I hope it never goes back to that, because that's tough.
Yeah, I definitely say COVID and the healthcare field did not like each other. That's for sure.
No, they didn't.
For the providers,
there's a lot going on in general.
Yeah, I was like, burnout was definitely, and we talked about that, even burnout with COVID in all areas was horrible. So I can almost imagine doing it kind of on your own a little bit, because of the fact that you are the only PTA out there, and you don't have too many other coworkers who are in the same role as you going through it. So I can definitely see that, and that's why it. I'm sure you enjoy I definitely enjoy it with the PTA source. You have, now more people you can reach out to and bounce ideas off of. And it's okay, I'm having a hard time with this. And so that's why me and Ken also kind of started this podcast too. It's just hey, you're not the only one feeling this. Cause a lot of times, I don't know about you, but when I was definitely early on, I was I suck at this. I'm horrible. What am I doing in this field? I can't do anything right sometimes. And you're I'm the only one feeling this way. And then, you start talking to more people and you're oh,
I'm not
everybody feels that way at some point.
It's funny because they set us up for success going through that program. And then you get out into the real world and you're did I learn anything? I felt like I learned so much, but I was did I actually learn what I need to know to do this job? And you're the whole medical field, PTA, if you want to be in this field, you're never going to stop learning. The science changes every single year, and we're constantly learning, taking our continuing education, all that stuff. So it's, I love what you guys are doing. I love that you guys are advocating for the PTA, because I know the PTA source with Nick, it's there's a lot of platforms out there for physical therapists. And then we usually go off of what the physical therapist is learning, because we have to know everything they know. We're just rendering their services. We're working under the general supervision, if you're working at the fullest autonomy that we can. And you're going out and you're doing the same stuff. Yeah, we're not evaling, we're not discharging, but we're doing everything. We're still assessing, we're still implementing everything, we're still critically thinking. And I love that you guys are advocating for us, because we do need more of a spotlight on our profession, and same with the PTA source. It's we need people to talk to. It just doesn't have to be our physical therapist that we work with. We can bounce stuff off each other.
Our PTs, I love working with PTs, but sometimes they do not understand what we do. And definitely if you get a new grad coming out, it's sometimes can be really tough working with a new grad PT, because of the fact that I'm not saying all, but I will say there's quite a few come out with a little bit of that God complex, and it's no, I know things, and I can do things, and clinical and book is completely different. And so, as like what we said is like as big as we are, we're also tiny at the same time when you talk about like just who you normally talk to. And so that's why like we really wanted to open this up a little bit more and get other point of views because, you know, as we even started, like when we went through school, traveling was not like no one mentioned it, like that was even an option. And definitely when you're coming out of school, I think it, maybe doing a year under your belt or however you want to do it in and setting and get a little bit under, that's great. But like travel is also great for when you're younger. And so by the time I feel like you learn about it in this field, sometimes you're like, well, I already have a family, that would have been cool. Or like, you've already kind of set your roots and it's like a little too late almost. Where traveling's growing. And so
or you can wait until the kids are old enough. I've met a few people that did that on the tail end of their careers, and that's what they do now. And so it's not a shoulda, coulda, woulda. It's when you want to do it, just take that
more
step.
a matter of time.
Yeah. So and that's why
we're definitely getting up there on time. We definitely lost track of time a little bit.
Oh, I did.
But speaking of Nick, there's a one more thing I want to touch on, because I mean I'm sure we have many more questions, and Joe, it's been a pleasure having you. I'm sure we're gonna ask you to come again because
I appreciate you guys having me on.
We have quite a bit of questions. But speaking of Nick and the PTA source, he actually had a question for you. I don't know if you gave it some thought, but he wanted to know the craziest thing that you've been through, nastiest even, like, and just kind of like what you learned from that.
So I would say the craziest thing and the nastiest thing I've seen are definitely different things. So the nastiest thing I will say, hands down, I need to plug in my computer. Sorry guys. Is that wound care. So
I knew it was going to be wound care.
It's always wound care.
It's always
wound care. Wound care is always the nastiest thing.
And it's not that I don't like wound care, because I am generally, I love it. I'm highly interested in it. It was
nasty.
There was a patient with they have a coccyx, like a wound, and we were going to change it, and the PT that I was working with at the time was going to debride it and whatnot, and the patient had smeared feces into it. And it was just like, it was just like, it was like horrible. It was like, it's horrible, but also like felt really bad for them. And just like, what can you, it's like, oh my gosh, what do you do with this? And it's like,
you're like, get the saline out, start flushing it. Oh
yeah, pretty much, all kinds of smells and emotions, that you're trying to keep inside. I'd say what I learned from it is patient education, and try to make them wipe the other way. Try to away from the wound, away from the wound, right?
Please, away from the wound.
Try not to put any pressure on that. Make sure that you're, when you're sleeping in bed, you gotta roll this way, roll that way, or just get up, get moving. And that was probably gross. The other grossest thing was like assisting in trach cleaning. I don't do well with sputum.
Trach cleaning.
Yeah. Oh yeah, have you never seen trach clean?
Yeah,
it's gross.
I know.
It's like snot, pretty much. It's just like literally like mucus and snot that you're just like cleaning them out with, and then like flush it, and then think of like when you go to the dentist and they get like the suction. You literally like, at least the place I was
you're just shoving it down.
You're just shoving the suction down. You're like, and then you can get like a little thing, and like they'll like swab it out in a way too if you're not getting enough on the sides. It's
and
gross.
It's gross, but like the patient feels like 100% better afterwards when they can breathe better
after all this buildup they had.
Yeah, and they're like, the patients are usually like, it's not like they're asleep or anything during this, so it's like not the best feeling for them either too. Because
and I'd say probably the craziest thing that I've experienced was, not to go on the COVID rant, but it was COVID. Like in a rural hospital, they were literally using plastic sheets with duct tape to make negative pressure air rooms. And just like, you know, it was all politicized, so nobody really cared. The whole hospital at one point got COVID. We're like, this can't actually be legit. Somebody screwed up.
Jeez.
But nah, it was the experience that I learned from that was self-advocating for myself. Like if I didn't want to be around people, I'm not going to be around people. I'm going to, you know, I know how to do infection control. We learned that in school, right? We should know better. And it's just like, I'm going to treat my patients, and I'm going to have minimal contact with pretty much everybody for the next 2 years. I do still exist if you need me, but like, namaste.
I'm just going to stay away.
Is a great thing. Use it.
So I'd say the learning experience is, as PTAs, we need to advocate for ourselves, you know our worth, because we are worthy of being in the room with nurses, doctors, physicians. You know, I get we work under the PT, but we can hold leadership roles. We have a ton of knowledge and experience, and, you know, keep pushing yourself. Like, never stop learning, because you never know who you're going to be able to help.
Yeah. Honestly, on that note, I can't say anything better than that right now. So we'll go ahead and wrap up this episode. Thanks again so much, Joe, for coming on. I'm sure we will talk to you again, and hopefully you'll come join us again.
Yeah, definitely. If you want to talk about something, just hit me up. You know how to find me.
We might have to do a fun story time where you're just telling us some outrage, because I feel like you got some good stories. I can tell you got some good stories, some rules.
I already got some good stories.
Yeah,
so we might have to have a story time with Joe. Many more questions, so yeah.
We're definitely gonna hit you up. But don't forget. Oh, sorry. Go on.
Thank you guys again for having me, and thanks for advocating for PTAs, and I love what you guys are doing, and thanks for having me on.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Appreciate it.
Thanks. And then if you guys are listening, go ahead and hit that share, like, and follow button. It helps us out so much by you guys doing that. You guys can check out more of our interviews by just scrolling down. We have been really enjoying a lot of the interviews, and I'm sure they're not going to stop anytime soon, because we're learning a lot, and I hope you guys are too. But don't forget to follow us at The PT Assistants on Instagram, and then check out our YouTube channel, which we have some fun reviews / going over, comparing some tools and all sorts of different things. So check that out. Other than that, I think that is all it for today. Again, thank you so much, Joe. And we will talk to you guys next time. Bye.